You guys do this every month, every week?
Uh, uh, we always intended for it to be every week, every 2 weeks, but we've been kind of negligent about it lately. But anyway, we're live now. Hey, greetings, fellow nerds. Welcome to another episode of Between Two Nerds, where we talk with prominent guests about all aspects of the networking industry, from protocols old and new to industry trends and drivers to up and coming technologies, and as always, things you should know to further your career. I'm Jeff Doyle, and with me is my friend and colleague, Jeff Tansura. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Jeff. Great to see you, as always.
Yeah, it's been a little bit. We were just chatting as we went live about the frequency or lack of frequency of the show, but we've got a great guest today. We've got the lovely and famous Dinesh Dutt, and for those of you in networking, let's see if I can get this centered.
Yep.
We've got I've got Dinesh's book here.
Oh,
This
thank
is
you.
this is a great book. One of the early books on I don't know if I want to say the first, but it was an early book on uh, data center virtualization, EVPN, VXLAN, all that sort of thing that Jeff and I have probably talked about 3 times as much as we've talked about any other subject on this show. So Dinesh, welcome to the show and thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Jeff Doyle and Jeff Tansura. It's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor to be included as a guest. Thank you.
Well, the other thing we have spent a lot of time talking about lately is network automation, and that's the topic of today's show because you've been very involved with the committee at the Network Automation Forum that has been working on the network automation framework, the NAF.
Yeah.
How's that for reused acronyms? And so we wanted to. I was watching you present at the last AutoCon on the topic, and just thought we got to get this guy on the show, and because it's an important topic, and so maybe we'll just start with what is the network automation framework? Is it a new requirement for automation? Is it a protocol? Is it what is it?
Yeah.
And what's the motivation behind it?
So I think it would be safe to say that the motivation came from when I gave my keynote speech at the second Network Automation Forum. I talked about why is network automation not here? And what do we do to ensure that when we have network automation NAF AutoCon 25, we are still not saying why is network automation not here? And Ryan Shaw reached out to me. He was one of the people working at AWS. Now he was working at a Zscaler. And he reached out to me and said, Dinesh, I really enjoyed your talk, but I have been thinking about doing some of the stuff. Is there any interest in you joining me? So Davidson from AWS, Claudia De Luna, who is a network consultant, myself, Ryan, kind of got together and started hashing this out. And Ryan was going to present at the second automation forum at the next AutoCon in Denver, but he couldn't make it. And he said, Dinesh, can you go present on my behalf? So I went, I said, only if I can redo all the slides, because I can't talk to other people's slides because they don't flow like I like to talk. So when I did that presentation, one of the things that came about was some people said, like, dude, there's so much work going on at the IETF. Why exactly are you talking what you're talking? Because my fundamental point was this. Look, we've been talking network automation forever. Today, if you talk to 10 people and say, do you do network automation? You get yes, maybe, fully. And when you ask them what they're doing, they say they have Cisco Catalyst Center.
Yeah.
Right? Or they pick something else and they say, oh, we have Meraki dashboard or Mist dashboard or something like that. And they say, oh, we do network automation we do network automation. So there is not even a clear definition of what network automation is. And then you have talks from people who say, I was struggling. I was in the desert and I spent 30 days there and I finally saw the light. And here is Network Automation Forum. And everybody else is like, dude, forget the light. I don't even see the desert. What am I supposed to do? And by the way, am I even interested in this friend of mine from Cisco, Dave Oran, always used to say, vision is just another name for hallucination. So coming back to the desert and everything else, I don't know if I want to participate in that hallucination. My idea of network automation is something else. So we didn't even have a common vocabulary. And from my perspective, the standards bodies have spent too much time. And as someone once said, for networking people, every solution is in the form of a protocol. You cannot do anything without a protocol. And network management is not a protocol problem. It is a problem that is outside of that, and which actually much more adheres to the original IETF maxim of be liberal in what you accept and conservative in what you send. So just be able to take the data in whatever form is available. This was something that came out of my Cumulus experience, because in Cumulus we were the Linux, and we are trying to say Linux for networking. So basically where the model is, if you think about systems, people don't spend time trying to build models. They simply say, I'll take the data as I want it, massage it to my heart's content, and be done and move on. I'm not going to say like, oh, I want it as SNMP. Oh, I want it as Yang. Oh, I want it as. So that was my whole point. Someone at the IETF invited me for a talk, and one slide I had there was, how many new protocols do we need from IETF in order to do the next network automation? And my answer was 0. Just get out of the way. Let's standardize. Let's ask the network vendors to standardize their outputs. And if it's CLI output, I don't care. Standardize that. Make them be responsible for their reference. So when they fail in the next iteration, we tell them, you failed to match your own protocol, your own reference, your own RFC, so to speak.
But in any case, whole intention beyond kind of big, when we started young development about 15 years ago, is to normalize outputs, create data models that are vendor independent, and allow you to kind of.
Exactly. And my take is, as you were saying, Jeff, I don't need to be consistent with another person as long as I'm consistent with myself. As long as I have my data model and I stay true to my data model, which can evolve, that's fine. Because, we will all invent 3 different things, and we are not going to all agree and sing Kumbaya and have a single data model. So this myth of a uniform data model is just bogus. And we as network operators continue to keep chasing it. And we think, as they say, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. As network engineers or network people, I guess the answer is the insanity is redoing the same protocol over and over again and expecting a different result. No one's going to sing Kumbaya. And so my point is, if we can focus on that. And so coming out of that talk, one of the things people said, there's a guy in NAF called Steinsey, and he said like, oh, Dinesh, good luck. When the vendors come in, you're going to have complete lack of whatever you're trying to do. No one's ever going to do anything with network automation forum. It's always going to be like this, or any attempt to do a standard. But we kind of said like, look, let's take a shot at trying to do something that's an iterative process that catches the overall perspective, and it's inclusive rather than exclusive. In BGP, if I don't do a particular thing, you can't send it. If I send it, the other side says, I'm sorry, I don't accept it because it's not part of the standard protocol. Whereas here we wanted to be able to say, let's be a little more inclusive rather than exclusive, and enable people to start building things and start from a framework, which is in network automation. The first word is network, not automation. So let's make sure that basic network practices work. So then you can say, I will automate that process of the network that I know that I do. If I was going to do a network refresh, what would I do as a good network engineer? Now, which part of it will I start to automate? And you can break that down. So that was the, how shall I say, motivation. And then a bunch of us got together. Now we wanted to be inclusive. One of the things for me is I feel vendors push too much. I wanted the community to be involved and to be able to do that. So we had a whole bunch of network automation forum community get involved. And basically now shepherding the process are, Damien from InfraHub, Wim Hendricks from Nokia, Claudia De Luna, Ryan Shaw, myself, Christian Adele, who's kind of responsible, I would say, in some sense, to kind of try and get things together a bit, herd the cats a bit, because too much of the discussion was still going on with like, is it a database or a data store or a data set? I'm like, guys, nobody cares. They just want to get started. So he was very good in trying to kind of boil that down and put that together. So now we have a good coherence as a team. And Srividya, who's been working on use cases for the abstract things that we tend to talk about. So summary statement, the genesis of this is to help the network engineering community come together to be able to understand what is a framework within which they can start to examine tools, within which they can start to examine practices, and then adapt them step by step. So it's not sufficient to say you should use a tool, pick your tool, Netbox, SuzyQ, whatever it is that you want to pick. You want to be able to say, here is what I want, and here is why these characteristics are important. If I don't have them, here is what I lose. Mm-hmm. Now you have the basis for a conversation. Now you have the basis for a language. Now you have a map from which you can start to build out the territory. That's how we started.
It's something I've seen at AutoCon over and over. And I think the reason that conference has been so successful and has grown so much is people coming with the idea of, we all understand we need automation. We all understand the business case for automation. None of us understands how we should get started. Yeah. Well, I don't want to say none of us, but that's the big question. How do I approach this? Yeah. And the framework becomes a way for you to start thinking about automation.
A common lexicon, if nothing else, right? So when you say, do you network automation, people can say like, yes, I'm doing network automation from the perspective of doing Ansible and pushing config, but I have nothing to do with respect to validating it, nothing to do. So people can start to have a common lexicon to start talking and to understand how to get from where they are to the next step, whatever their next step is. And your next step, Jeff Doyle, could be different from Jeff, the other Jeff's next step, even though you both share the same first name. The two Jeffs can be going in different directions, but you both have a common map from which to work. We all don't have to go towards the mountain. Some of us can go to the beach, still have a good time.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things that really stuck with me, in your presentation last time I watched it was, you said, in this framework, you will not find the word must. It's always should, because it's a recommendation, not a requirement.
So it's CBCP, in other words.
I'm sorry?
It's CBCP, best common practices.
Yeah, it's best common practices. And to me, should means, you have to do it unless you have a good reason not to. Mm-hmm. And the trouble is, for many people who are starting off, it's like saying, I want to write a program. And I say, no, you cannot write a program till you know functional programming or object-oriented programming. Dude, I just want to print hello world and, dazzle myself. Why can't I do that? Right? And so I think people are at different levels, and trying to exclude them from those levels only means they are more frustrated. And as they say, just because you don't have good answers or you shut them up doesn't mean they won't go somewhere else seeking the answers. And if it's the arms of other vendors who are providing bad answers, then it's not such a great thing. So I think being inclusive is helpful. And so,
And, so we've been talking a lot about the framework. Maybe we need to actually see what the framework looks like at this point.
Absolutely. So let's pull that up.
There it is. Hey. Our producer, Sean, is right on top of things here. Yeah, and this is the framework.
Sean. Yep, this is the framework. And if you think about it, I would say, the part about, let's start with, let's kind of back up. The basic ideas are simple. There's a presentation layer. You've got the intent, which is what do I want of my network? And observability, which is what do I get off it? It doesn't matter what I want. What is there is there. So you have what I want, what I get, and we have a mechanism to push what I want to the network to make it do what we would like it to do. And we have the collection, which tells us what are we really getting, and a way to orchestrate all of this and present this and say present it not just to a human, present it to maybe via an API to somebody else who wants to do something with it. So it's actually a very simple collection of blocks. You've got the intent block, you've got the executor, which is the write function, the collector, which is the read function, observability, which is trying to see what is instead of what ought to, so you can kind of fix the feedback loop. And then there is a presentation layer. For someone who's kind of looked at it historically, who's aware of the historical pieces of this looks a little like, I think, CF Engine, which was done a long, long time ago, which had this kind of a feedback loop where you pushed what you wanted, and if detected there was a difference, it tried to fix it for you. Chef, Puppet all try to do similar things, but that's roughly the idea here.
Yeah, more often, I think about 6 or so years ago, we published RFC 19315 intent-based networking definition that has very similar picture and talks about some interactions between different blocks and actually provides some terminology, things like source of truth, enforcement.
I've always defined, in stuff I've talked about, intent versus observability as, what I want versus what I have.
Exactly. And I like to try and use English words for them rather than those big words, because, intent has been hijacked by a lot of different vendors to mean different things. Observability has been hijacked by a bunch of people to mean different things. So I want to kind of try and keep that difference of what I want, what I've got. How do I reconcile the difference? Is there worth something to be done about reconciling? And is there somebody who's kind of like the symphony conductor, who's basically trying to conduct the piece, who's the orchestration, so to speak? And you see a lot of arrows there, because we had people from various products saying, but my product does that and you're kind of taking it out. Well, I'm orchestrating the intent, I'm orchestrating. Okay, you know what? Let's just throw the arrows everywhere so everybody can do everything. So I would say the arrows represent our so-called compromise. Some people might choose to do it differently. I might choose to say, like, I don't want this particular way of doing things. For example, the orchestrator to talk directly to the executor or the collector. But, we can come up with different things. And in the spirit of inclusivity, we said, let's just have it that way.
Yeah.
The only thing is you don't have the collector doing writes. So we are So, So this is roughly there, right? And you've got basically state to keep the data, so to speak, logic to deal with the data, and then gathering the data, what's so-called telemetry. I mean, if you think about telemetry, the meaning of the word telemetry is gathering data remotely. So that's all. The collector and the executor are just that.
And you're depending on what your goals are for automation. All of these parts of this framework could be different elements in a single automation solution, or you could be building a whole collection of automation functions, and this gives you a guideline for making sure you're addressing all of the pieces you need to address, and that you are adding that.
Yeah. Or why, if I leave out something, what is it that I'm missing? What am I going to, what is the limitation of my solution? Because at any given time, as engineers, you're continuously making trade-offs. Your trade-offs may be different from mine at that particular moment, not because you and I disagree on the final answer. It's just that you've got a time constraint. I don't have a time constraint, so I can do something a little bigger or broader, or you can do something more specific because you need it done because you're having outages in a particular situation, or however you want to slice and dice. The important part is we have the same lexicon. We understand why we are doing. We understand by not doing the other thing, what are we missing? So we know what we are going to build towards. And every one of these pieces can be done manually, right? You take any network engineer, I want to add a VLAN. That's intent. Whether you go manually configure it or you do something else, that's intent. Once I've configured the VLAN, I have to go verify that the VLAN is actually configured on the device, whether you do it manually or not. All basic good practices that are just manually done can be represented by this as well. So it is just good engineering basic practices that people do today, good network engineers do today already, so to speak.
Yeah, probably if you've been working on this at least some time, you should have at least most of these pieces.
Mm-hmm.
could be in different parts of organizations, but they're so logical and so obvious that
That's the
probably if you
basic
look around in your org, they're already there doing different things.
Exactly. That's the basic point of this is you should be able to absorb pretty quickly, get started pretty quickly. You don't have to argue over, do I need a complex software to do intent? Put it in a YAML file, write a little Python script, write a little shell script to push it out if you want. That depends on your particular job description and what you're trying to do at that particular point. Yes, you don't have versioning. Oh no, I do have versioning. I put it in Git. Is there a reason that's wrong? No, there's nothing wrong with it. It comes with certain trade-offs, and if you've made those trade-offs and you're happy with them, given your current circumstances, knock yourself out.
Probably the most complexity in such system comes in a reconciliation layer, where you actually have your intended state, your operational/observed state, and you're trying to make what does it mean when they don't match, right?
Absolutely.
And
And
this
there's
is
so
where
much
a lot of value comes in, and being software developer or in general, good architect, you could figure out how do I make closed loops. So when my intended state interacts with my observed state and can say, oh, VLANs that you want to configure, it's actually your intent, but it has never been configured. Or it has been configured, but has never been instantiated in forwarding state, right? So all of this stuff, this is where real value comes up.
Yeah. And it's a simple thing, right? For example, I just want my class topology to have multipathing across my spines. People forget in Cumulus, we basically did it in FRR, whereby the multipath AS path relax was obvious, enabled by default in the data center profile. Many other vendors don't do it. So it's very common for people who do the migration to find that they are actually not getting, everything looks correct. BGP states are established, but no routes are actually installed. So, your level of what verification also means in any one of these states, to your point, Jeff, of reconciling the difference between what you wanted and what you got, is also a multifaceted and a nuanced sequence of steps that you have to go through.
That's why Young was and still is such a good candidate. It's strictly typed. It allows you to compare at tree structure. So you know exactly what's there, what's not, and you understand what leaves are missing or unpopulated, or there's some inconsistency in data model as such. So I really like data modeling approach. I think it's fundamentally good approach if you can make it work for you.
The problem with data modeling that I see is a lot of people start with data modeling and then they don't build in extensibility. Right? It needs to be extensible. It needs to be extensible in a way that's different. That's the first part. And the second part for me that I feel that I struggle with some of the data models is, take a simple example of OSPF. Do you put things inside verbs and areas, or are verbs and areas just attributes of sessions? So, you've got two structures. One is a contained structure, and you can argue for the contained structure. It makes logical sense. Or you can argue for a flat. For example, in SUSE-Q, we did everything flat because it's trivial. If you make it flat, query is quick. I don't have to do a structured query. It's a very simple way to query things. So when you flip the argument, to me, a data model should work not just in how you configure, back to your point of reconciliation, Jeff, it should also make sense when you can read it back and make sense of it. And today, our ability to query data is so much bigger and broader and capable than we had originally. I kind of like to go with that flow. And so, and just to be clear, I'm not saying that Yang is a terrible answer or Yang is a great answer. I'm saying we need to be able to look at all of those things, and different people may choose different trade-offs. I think we agree that it needs to be modeled, and modeled consistently, more importantly. So to me, that's one of the things about intent is it's not sufficient to have a schema. You need to have a schema that is extensible, right? Different people have different ways of doing things. And if you can't have it extensible and versionable, the problem that you run into is the Marshall-McLuhan statement, we define the tools and then the tools define us. Oh, I can't do this. Why? Because my schema doesn't let me do it. That can't be the reason. So,
right.
Yeah, well, kind of going to all of that. One of the terms so common in automation that you don't see anywhere on this is single source of truth.
Yes.
And I think that is that's there's a huge significance between the relationship between the presentation layer and the observability layer. Going to what you said, of what I want to see in my network, what I want to query right now may be completely different from what I need to query 30 minutes from now. And the presentation layer is giving me that interface to be able to say, here's what I want to see, and vice versa. Here's what I want the network to do. In maybe very plain
Absolutely.
English
Yeah.
language. That then gets pushed down to intent.
So
Yeah.
this actually is a term that we, I think, introduced long time ago in Apstra, and it made it also all the way to the RFC, intent-based telemetry. It's really telemetry.
Who's what, Jeff? I'm sorry.
Intent-based telemetry.
Yeah.
It's telemetry that's related to your intended state. You're not interested, really. You don't need all this terabytes of information if they're not related to what you're trying to do. So you need to be able to not only configure stuff, but also get telemetry of what you have configured, not more, not less, but exactly what you intended to do. I think it's fundamental for a scalable distributed system.
Absolutely. I think what you're saying, Jeff, if I have understood you correctly, I think you're saying something else that is actually very relevant in this discussion, which is it's not sufficient to present the configuration in one abstraction. I want to build a clause, and then the debugging or the observability at a different level of abstraction, because then you just destroyed the purpose, because I can't really troubleshoot what I just did. So for example, I want clause. I don't want to know about ASNs. I don't want to know about IP addresses. I don't want to know anything. But there's a bug. It's not working. Oh, now you have to know about ASNs. Oh, now I have to know about IP addresses. That completely defeats the purpose. So a debugger that allows you to look only at machine language versus C-level instructions or Python level instructions is not really helping you make that progress. So I think from that perspective, that's another thing. I feel like intent is fine. I prefer not just intent, I prefer intent to be declarative, because intent can be at different levels. My classic example is have a happy marriage. You can't turn that into anything meaningful. But
there's
when
one or two elements under
angry, only one of you gets to be angry at any given time in a good relationship is something that can be expressed and actually actionable, so to speak. So being declarative is somewhat more useful than just saying intent and talking about high levels. Because one of the problems I see is, and this is something that I see over and over again, and maybe I'm very wrong about how I'm saying this, and I'm maybe very cynical, but I feel like as humans, one of the things we tend to do is go for the easy answer as much as possible, the silver bullet, the whatever it is, so I don't have to do the hard stuff. When SDN came out as an example, everybody was like, oh, I don't have to do anything. It's very easy. It'll just take care of it for me because it's all intent. And then Cisco hijacked that term with their NCMA answer and said like, oh, we build intent-based networks. And guess what? They didn't really advance networking very much. The problems that they were dealing with are still present. Whereas if you said instead, I'm dealing with a different set and I'm not talking about hijacking at that level, I'm talking about very specific intent at particular levels, then you can declaratively, so to speak, you can begin to make sense of it and make progress, because you're still speaking, hey, I want to configure BGP with this ASN number. I don't know whether in Juniper it is router BGP followed by something versus in Cisco it is this way and in Cumulus it's a different way. I just would like to configure BGP with ASN number 5. And I would like to talk to Jeff with it, right? And that's it. That intent at that level makes sense. But we seem to kind of forget that part. And now to me, I feel like everybody is running around saying that AI will solve all my problems, when people who are practitioners are learning that, dude, I can be a great coder. And if I don't have the infrastructure in place to be able to take advantage of AI, it's not going to work. I mean, the old adage, I mean, if all of us here are somewhat gray haired, and we all know the term, the term GIGO, right? Garbage in, garbage out. When computers were first invented, oh my God, it's going to solve all humanity's problems. Didn't. I mean, it is making some advances. The advances are coming slowly, but we need to get the same thing with network automation, the same with a bunch of other things. We need to kind of learn that we need to understand what it is that we are doing and how to shepherd it, guide it, at least now. And if you don't know it, then you're going to be lost. And I think people don't want to learn that lesson. Intent is another thing like that. Why am I saying all this rambling thing? I think I went off on a ramble. I apologize. My fundamental point is the words need to not just be words at such a high language that anybody can say anything they want and it means the same thing. That we need to be, that's why I like with intent to say the word declarative, because then you can actually push for something that you can understand, whether it's as an LLM or just in how you configure the device using whatever tool it is.
Is it fair to say? I mean, that's one of the reasons I think between the intent element and the presentation element, there's a two-way arrow there.
Yes.
So you can say at the presentation layer, I need the network to do such and such. Intent layer might say, you need to clarify that. I need more details. But you still want to be able to present it in understandable language.
Yes. And in ways that are declarative, because then otherwise you're telling I have to type router BGP 6501 versus router BGP and an open curly brace, something else. That's the part you want to avoid.
Yeah.
Whether you do it via data model, you do it via AI, whatever it is, but you need to be able to understand that part and be able to talk about it declaratively. That's at least what I feel. Intent without declarative syntax is actually a high language mumbo jumbo that can mean anything, and you would be in trouble because of the point that Jeff was making earlier, which is if you don't have the intent and the observability at the same level of abstraction, it doesn't work very well.
And I think that's a kind of hierarchy of intents, right? At highest level, you don't want to know what BGP is. You want to say, I want Jeff D to talk to Dinesh.
Yeah.
Another level will say, I know it has to be done through BGP because it's the only thing that's supported, but I don't care what CLI it is, what vendor it is. So I want you to configure something that is BGP and allows two people to talk to each other. So they're kind of levels, and then eventually you come to something that actually saying router BGP 65,000 neighbor Dinesh, right? So.
You're right. They are all layers. The important part for me is back to this point that you cannot talk about any one of them if the ability of the two sides, the intent and the observability side, to not be at the same level, because then you always have this discrepancy of how intent is translated into actual observability, what the actual syntax or not the syntax, the lower level thing is. I mean, think of it today with AI and LLM. We talk about context engineering. We talk about prompt engineering, right? They're all intent. And the trouble is, it can mean so many different things. And you need that ability to be able to somehow distill it somewhat more precisely.
Mm-hmm. But I think it would kind of make the picture more interesting. Here, both intent and observability are single dimensional. They're actually multidimensional, right? Because at higher level, Dinesh needs to talk to Jeff D. You actually say something and you see it another side here. At lower level, you say, I want to talk over BGP. So suddenly you take a look, is BGP session up? And then you start looking, if it's down, maybe I need to look at FSM and say, is it stuck in connected? What is it exactly? So each intent layer has associated observability layer. And if you keep layers intact and allow them to communicate properly horizontally, you might solve a lot of issues reasonably simply because it's kind of content.
Right? I completely agree. And that also helps you be able to understand from your own perspective, if I don't have the same level of abstraction on both sides, at what level do I need to be to make sure that I understand what I'm doing? Otherwise, it doesn't work. So again, that aspect is useful. But you made a point earlier, Jeff D, that there is no source of truth here.
Yeah.
And that was a very deliberate thing because I never liked that term. I felt like when you say source of truth, it means that it is the single point of everything. In reality, it is not. It depends on what you're trying to do. It might be the source of truth of what you want, but it's not the source of truth of what you got. And even from that perspective, there are so many different things. Source of truth didn't capture policy, did not capture business logic. There are so many levels of different things. So source of truth never made sense to me. And I think all the other people in the group were felt very similarly. And I was in fact teasing Damien because he was one of the people who was very much against source of truth, and then he put in his what is the word for it, company tagline when they were presenting at NAF at AutoCon, intent, source of truth. And I was like, Damien. And he was like, dude, I just have to agree, get people to listen to me. Otherwise, it's so hard. So we also, as part of the NAF automation framework, what I'm trying to say is also move people to that common lexicon of being able to say intent and that there is no single source of truth.
Well, I think this is kind of where you want to be, right? Looking at wider computer science, when you compare two things, you want at least one of them to be immutable.
Yeah.
Then it becomes much easier. If both of them move, it's really complicated problem, especially if they're multidimensional. So if your source of truth is incomplete, it's a huge problem. Reconciliation is impossible. However, if going back to what you exactly said, it's extensible enough to take not only state, but policies, everything else that kind of contributes to entire state of the system, it might be really a good thing.
Yeah. And it's an iterative process, right? That's the other thing we want to do is be iterative. Perfection is not a destination, it's a journey. And it just is asymptotic. You're not going to get, it's like the speed of light. Going up to 90 may be somewhat easier. 90 to 91 takes more energy, more problems, etc. So as you get higher and higher up the level of your automation stack, it gets harder and harder, the remaining problems to be solved. And so it's more nuanced. It sets you up, obviously, to solve those problems, to make them meaningful to you, but it also gets harder and harder. So yes, you need that ability to kind of decide how to tune and how to keep iterating on the answer. That's why you need extensibility. And the world changes. When we did EVPN, there was no notion of next hop self being used the way we did with eBGP and FRR, right? And there was no notion of unnumbered BGP the way we did it in FRR. That doesn't mean that it was wrong or it shouldn't have been done, or we have eVPN. Every time technology keeps changing, words evolve, solutions evolve. And so you need to be able to have a framework that stays constant while allowing that evolution. Otherwise, it risks being completely lost.
And this is usually what differentiates good engineer from great engineer, right?
Yeah. And also the other part for me, I feel over and over again with network engineers is that we somehow seem to care a lot about how it is done. And we don't care to say like, look, I want it done. Back to the notion of intent. I just want it done. I don't care about how it is done. Oh, it has to be XML. I mean, I saw a draft, an IETF draft floating around saying like, oh, for this, we must use Kafka. I'm like, the world has moved on to other things. And you're now sitting and saying we have to use Kafka. Why? XML. Who does XML today? But we are so focused on XML. And then, we do other things like saying, oh, we invent XML, we do Yang, and then we say it is terrible. So then we invent GNMI. It's like we keep creating problems and solving them over and over again instead of saying like, look, I want to step away from that. It makes a lot of sense when I'm talking actual protocol like BGP. It makes less sense at this level. So we should kind of relinquish that kind of strictness and focus on solving the problem.
Yeah, I think it's, there's a certain amount of human nature that, here's
Absolutely.
what worked for me. Therefore, this is the best way to do things.
Yeah.
And it's important when we talk about those things to say, this worked for me. Maybe it'll work for you. Maybe it won't.
Yeah. Or to understand that there are equivalences. You don't have to insist. And where equivalences work, back to the idea of original maxim, be liberal in what you accept, conservative in what you send. I think that allows for people to interact, interoperate, not just protocols, in ways that are actually enabling rather than disabling.
Yeah, and I think looking kind of at history, it's kind of almost religious, must be done my way thing created so much harm. Look at young
Continues to create
oh,
much more grief.
yeah. Why do
Absolutely.
you need to do things two different ways? Because one part says this is how we want to do it. We need agility, versioning. Another part say no, but we are the SDO. We know better. We'll tell you what to do. And then eventually they said, we'll do it our way.
Yeah, exactly. And also people get so caught up. I mean, I remember when I talked about Suzy Q to customers, there are so many customers who go like, but how do you get the data? I say, multiple ways. Why do you care? No, I want to know. So I say, okay, we do SSH for most devices. We do netcon for some, like Juniper. We do gRPC, JSON RPC for things like SR Linux. It depends on the platform. Oh, but you don't use Yang. No, because of these reasons. Oh, you don't use GNMI? No, for these reasons. Oh, but you should use GNMI. Okay, when it's ready, we'll use it. Oh, but then they say, if you use GNMI or Yang, how do you deal with that particular vendor's differences from the standard? So you first box me in to use a solution that doesn't deal with the specificity of a vendor. And then you ask me, how do I solve that problem? Why? I choose not to accept the problem, so then I don't have to solve it.
Sure.
So I think there is that specificity
approach, right? Because
pardon?
It's really the only possible and pragmatic approach. No current solution has 100% coverage unless you are kind of within realm single vendor. So you have to normalize the data no matter what you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, to me, the one that has 100% is SSH. I get 100%. It doesn't matter what you want to pick. SSH has, because engineers tend to use that as a way to figure out all the answers to their problems, right? When they're debugging or doing whatever else. So I find, at least in my experience, it's not the most efficient, but it always gets me more of what I want than pretty much any other protocol. The problem with it is it's not the best for a bunch of things. For example, if I want to get alerts, SSH is not the best way because I'm pulling data as opposed to it being pushed to me. But we can deal with some of those differences a little bit. But in general, I find one gets to 90%, whereas the other
again, it's pragmatic approach. Practically, you really don't want to deal with strings when you're trying to parse, right? I still remember a vendor changing dash to underscore, an entire network being down for 4 hours, right?
That's not the only thing. I've had customers, not customers. I've had vendors push out JSON, which is not even valid JSON. And I've had vendors who change the version name of the key in the JSON for what the version was. So when I was going to look for the new version, I didn't get it. So I said, I don't know how to access the version. And the customer is like, hey, I upgraded the software and the version is not there. I was like, what the heck? You go take a look. And they change the string. In a similar fashion to what you were saying, Jeff, underscore to hyphen or whatever else. And
then so again, I would like to kind of operate at object level, right? Whatever it is, whatever you call it, pigeon, as long as it does something that it's supposed to be doing, I'm good.
So. Yeah, but the trouble is I don't have not customers. Again, I keep saying customers, but I don't have vendors actually doing that. And because of the lack of their doing it, I just say like, look, that's the reality we have to live with. So rather than keep fighting it, let's just move on. Let's hold them to being consistent, but other than that, move on. When the world is all a better place, when everybody is, there is world peace and no hunger and no famine and everybody can be a genius or Lake Wobegon residents, then, it's fine. But till then, we live in an impractical, what's the word? Not impractical. We live in a very fragmented, utopian world. And we just deal with the reality of the utopian world. And I feel like it's only the networking people who struggle so much with it. I don't see compute people care. So which is why to me, I just say like...
By mental state. I'm not sure what it is, but networking is very separate kind of people.
Yes, they are very different kind of people, and I feel like I said again, they kind of tend to want to do things in a protocol specific way, when in reality you don't need protocols for that. And for me, that, like I said, my lesson from Cumulus, one of my lessons from Cumulus days was watching the compute people not really care about the model. I mean, they needed a model. Don't get me wrong. We all completely agree they need a model, but they don't need two guys to agree to the model. As long as they stayed consistent to their model, was all we really needed, because then you could talk and reason at an abstraction that made sense, as opposed to strings. But on the other hand, they didn't really try and make three different people work together.
Not sure. I think we're
And
just less exposed to that. If you look at TMF and Redfish and all this stuff, I think they had their own fights, and they were as bad as our networking fights.
yeah, look, there will always be those kinds of things. I'm not saying that they are saints in any way, but the maxim I went with is, and I think you guys coming back to the automation framework, one of the other things we wanted to do was make this composable, meaning you could have different pieces work on different vertical functions and put them together so that they all in the end give you the same result, rather than have a single PAIN of glass to be able to do everything. Because we've all seen TVs which came with VCRs, and guess where they are now, right? Having single form functions, again, going back to, again, that's not entirely accurate. I mean, I was going to say, look at Unix. It's always had composable functions, and that made a big difference. But also Unix has Perl and Python and various other things. So we can build complex systems, but we were wanting to make it to be composable. So you could choose to say, I have two different tools, both of which sit in the intent bucket, but solve different things. But together, I get the intent that I want, the intent function, so to speak. So this is more a functional or a block rather than a tool block, so to speak. Back to your point,
Dinesh,
Jeff D.
how do we take this block, which is kind of high-level abstraction, for people who are starting? And the irony of this discussion, if we move it 5 years back, we could have been having the same discussion word to word. If we move it 10 years back, again, we could have been having the discussion word to word.
Completely
Nothing
agree.
has changed. How do we help people with this? How can they make kind of high-level picture and set of ideas and start looking into some implementations?
Great question, Jeff. And you're absolutely right. Roll back the years and you get the same discussion almost, so to speak. It's gotten a little more refined, but you get generally the same kind of discussion. I think the way we do that is first, in my opinion, by accepting that different people will do different things, and to kind of stick with the basic network engineering practices and to start codifying some of those practices. So Srividya, for example, has taken our automation framework and is putting together some use cases. Claudia is working on some of the use cases, so that you can look at this block and say, here is how you express adding a VLAN, adding a route, adding a this, adding a that. How do you take that specific function and map it into each of these? And then back to Jeff T's point, to kind of start layering up, because at one level it's not sufficient to simply say I want BGP with these ASN numbers. You also want to level up and level up and level up, and so work that layer by layer to be able to do that. So we are working on Srividya especially, and a bunch of others are working on examples to be able to kind of use this framework to show people how to do it. And then there are other people who say like, okay, great, now we have this example. Here is tool A that does it this way, tool B that does it this way, and Python scripts that I wrote on my own which does it this way, so to speak, or Ansible. And so trying to give concrete examples for specific functions using this framework and showing how all of them map to the same area is one way we are trying.
Should we expect some kind of open source tooling that you are building according to this picture, kind of going bottom up, being published, versioning? Is something happening really?
No, we are not looking at any tooling. The framework, at least from the NAF committee that is working on all of this, two things we are kind of not, we are very clear we are not focused on is trying to add any new protocols and we are not working on building any new tools. We feel there are lots of tools, and us trying to build a tool is just another way of saying us building a protocol. So we want to be able to say, we'll help you and help vendors and other people evaluate how to add this. So if I as a vendor come in and say, for example, SuzyQ sits in the observability, we put in a list of things about why observability matters, what functions matter, and why do they matter, and if something is missing, what are the consequences of missing that. So as a customer, as a network engineer, you can take that piece, and then when you come to me, you can say like, hey, look at the network observability piece that was in the network automation forum. They said that these three are important. Can you explain which pieces do you do, and if you think it's otherwise or not? And so we are trying to be, again, like I said, inclusive, while at the same time trying to put in shoulds everywhere we can, because they are the best practices of network engineers.
Sure, but you
Well,
cannot be
going to what you
everybody.
said about layer to layer to layer, I mean that applies very much here. That this is not an end product. The framework itself is a work in progress, and
Exactly.
while this model that we're looking at on the screen here is unlikely to change,
Yeah.
you're adding more and more depth to it, more and more.
Exactly.
More and
More
more
and
layers.
think of it as a skeleton around which we add more flesh, we add different things, and we keep building it so that it gets better and better. It evolves in some way, but the basic framework, the skeleton, stays the same.
But the model is fine, and building it's in its kind of singularity or across or layer per layer is fine. The question is to really err here, right? Each one is set of APIs and contracts between parties that try to communicate. If you don't define them, it's not going to really work.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So that's the next level. Like I said, again, what we are trying to do is iterative. So for example, my talk at the NAF, the last NAF that happened, I think in Austin, was merely trying to present what we had done so far. Wim and Damien did a presentation at Nanog where they took this and the basic framework document and put in like 80 slides to explain a bunch of things. And now we are working together to put in more words. And that thing that you are talking about, Jeff T, on intent, on executor, on collector, on observability, so we can start to define these promises, and we can start to define what they mean, what each block does, what is its contract, etc. And then we can start to evaluate how the tools are built, or you're doing your own thing, or whatever else it is, and how do we map them. But to your point, we have to keep coming back to Mother Earth and trying to map all of these abstractions into things that network engineers do every day. If we don't do that, this becomes another, albatross that hangs around everybody's neck and not really useful.
Yeah.
And to me, that's not very helpful, because that's like the classic XKCD cartoon. Right? There are 13 interoperable standards. Now there are 14 because we worked on that. And I don't want to be part of an XKCD cartoon, as I've said many times.
Yeah, if you look at the evolution of SDN, that's pretty much what it is, right?
So that's what I want to kind of see if we can avoid.
So for anybody that's watching that is likes what we're all saying here and wants to know more information, where do we find more information on this framework?
I think a big part of the activity is all structured around the AutoCon conferences and the NAF Slack channels. So join the NAF Slack, and then once you're there, you can kind of figure out where the actual talk is all happening, so to speak. And we keep putting this out. There's a GitHub repository where all these documents exist, so you can go take a look at it and start to ask questions, open issues, provide PRs to fix certain things, etc. And we continue to evolve. So our basic idea is to every conference, which happens twice a year, to be able to show progress in what we are trying to build. So we get to a stage that we can say it's fairly fleshed out in a way that is useful to people. There are examples to buttress what we are writing, and then kind of take a pause while people actually absorb, use it to realize what's the next level of iteration to be done.
Is there a Slack channel, IRC channel, something that people can interact with each other?
Yeah, it's all
Yeah.
on the Network Automation Forum Slack channel. So if you just go to NAF Network Automation Forum website, I think there is a Slack link there that you can use to join. And once you join, you can figure out how to get to the framework specific talk. And I believe they are also putting together a tutorial for the next NAF, which is in Munich or Berlin, I forget. The
It's in
one
Munich.
that's going to be in May. And they are having a 2-hour tutorial where they are going to actually talk about this, walk into the details of this, talk with real examples. Okay, here is an example of what we are going to do. Now we are going to figure out for this example, what is the intent piece, what's the executor piece, what's the collector piece, etc., etc. So those are the different ways in which you can engage.
Are you going to be in Munich?
No, it's my daughter's high school graduation, so I'm not going to be in Munich.
That's right. You told me that
Yeah.
earlier. I forgot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So unfortunately,
there.
I won't be in Munich. But I also think it's good in a way for having other people be able to talk as well. You know, when one person says it, we tend to say the same things in the same fashion. Having other people say it helps, you know, different people see it, because we all have our cracks. And as Leonard Cohen said, and the crack is how the light gets in. So all of us are slightly differently cracked, and we just need someone else who's cracked like us to say it, to hear it. So I want more people
it makes really good kind of tradition, for lack of better word. After each NAF, we convene here with you, potentially Damian, maybe some other people, and just see the progress, kind of cadence of predefined meetings.
That would be actually fantastic. That's a great idea, Jeff. And like I said, again, getting other people on would be helpful too. I'm happy to come on. I don't have a problem. I enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for having me. But having other people also come on, like, for example, I would certainly encourage having Srividya on the next time, so she can tell you, okay, we talked about the framework. So how are the examples? Tell me more about the examples. And then the next round, talk a little more about each of the blocks and where we are and how we are progressing. That would be very helpful, I think, to the network automation community, all the engineers. That would be very good. Thanks for suggesting that, Jeff. I think that's a great idea.
Jeff, let's have at least 2-3 meetings a year, just making sure we keep them real.
Yeah, absolutely. And you should keep us real. Absolutely. And that's one of the things for me is, like, you know, if we are not real, it's not worth it. It has to be a value to the community at the end of the day, not to anybody else.
I think we are that age that if there's nothing at the end of it, what's the point, right?
Yeah. To me, it's to be of value, to be of service. Everything else follows after.
Yeah. And we're getting right to the top of the hour here. So I definitely want to, Dinesh, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show and going to Jeff, what you were saying. We definitely want you back. There's, you know, every once in a while you get these guests that are just easy to talk to, and you know, you kind of end up being surprised that the hour has gone by so fast. And this has been
thank you for having me on. Thank you for being such generous hosts to me. I appreciate it.
Well, I do want to take a quick moment here to let you do a little promotion. You know, you mentioned Suzy Q a couple of times through the thing. Tell us about Suzy Q and what you're doing.
So Suzy Q is a network observability platform. It started as a labor of love. I basically wanted to do things because I saw that particular problem is not really well solved. And I started there. But then, you know, I started having companies come to me and say, like, hey, we love you, but we can't, we don't know if you'll be Tom Hanks, and say, I think I'm tired. I'm going to go home now. Then what are we going to do with what is there? And, you know, open source is no longer what it used to be. Open source meant a community. Open source meant a lot of things. And these days it's become just a way for me to be able to get free stuff, because the fangs of the world, I think, in some way destroyed that community part of open source. And it's all like, hey, I'm not going to pay for it because you're probably funded by some VC. So anyway, you know, at one point I had like 600 or 700 GitHub stars 3-4 years ago. And I said, like, if each of the people who have given me a GitHub star, if you give me $1,000 a year, $1,000 a year, I'll never develop anything in enterprise. Everything will be open source. I do need to put some food on the table. But in any case, so we have now an enterprise version that has evolved a lot more differently. And the fundamental point for me is I think network operators are each different in their own way because their networks are each different in their own way. And trying to build a tool that is designed to do what I think needs to be done is wrong. I think that's why management tools have largely failed, especially in the observability space or the monitoring space, so to speak. So my fundamental idea was, in terms of SuzyQ, to build a tool that gave you building blocks, Lego blocks, that allowed you to then go wherever you wanted. If you think about a kid who's given a doll that can talk and lights up everything, the kid is obviously more fascinated by that doll, by that toy, compared to a bunch of Lego blocks which are just sitting there. They don't do anything, so to speak. But a month later, that doll that talked is sitting on the side because you got bored. It does the same thing. The Lego blocks is up to your imagination to play and do a lot of things with. So I kind of think about SuzyQ in a similar way, to try and fit into what you want to do, not what I think you should do. So that's the enterprise. We have some very large customers who are using us in production. We seem to be doing fairly well. And that's what it is. You can reach us on stardustsystems.net, talk to us about, ask for a demo, do a POC, so to speak. But yeah.
Well, Dinesh, thank you so much. Jeff,
Thank
you have
you.
any?
Yeah, I have one
thoughts?
comment. For the next one, you will have to grow a bird.
That's right.
But for that, Jeff, I'll have one problem. I'll have to be divorced. My wife will kick me out if I grow up there.
No, we're not going to take that one on our conscience.
Well, we had
Thank you
one
so
show
much.
where we had like 5 guests on, and every one of us had facial hair. We'd start
No,
having
I thought what you were going to say, Jeff T, is Jeff Doyle. You will need to wear glasses the next time you're on.
There you go. Yeah.
True.
Yeah. Okay.
There we
Well,
go. You see, it's
There you go. Now you have it.
So now you're
nobody can see my beady eyes now.
Yes, exactly. And like I was joking at the conference, like, the trouble with getting old is you're no longer a visionary because you can't see.
That's right. I was sorry, we're about out of time here. I shouldn't even say it, but I was at Nashville at a Cisco event yesterday, day before yesterday, and was at dinner looking at the menu with a friend, and I had to borrow somebody else's readers to read the menu. And it's like, that's when you know you're old, is when everybody swaps glasses around.
Yes, exactly. And you talk about what aches and pains you have when you get up in the morning.
Exactly. Yeah. So Dinesh, again, thank you so much. And we definitely would love to have you on again sometime.
Absolutely. Please let me know if I can add anything of interest to the topic. I'll be happy to join you guys and have a nice conversation.
Wonderful. And in the background, Robert and Sean, thank you so much for,
thank you guys.
For driving as usual.
Thank you.
Great job as always. And for everybody watching, we'll see you at the next Between Two Nerds.
And thank you guys for doing this as a service to the community. I think a lot of people benefit.
Thank you.
Thank you.